Welcome back to English Everyday, learners and dreamers. Today's story is not just about royalty, it's about a legend. Imagine a tale of power, passion, intelligence, betrayal, and courage, all wrapped in one incredible woman. This is the epic life of Cleopatra, the last queen of ancient Egypt. A story so rich and dramatic it could rival any Hollywood film, and it's perfect for learning English while traveling through time. Chapter 1. Cleopatra's Early Life. More than 2,000 years ago, in 69 BCE, in the bustling, sun-soaked city of Alexandria, Egypt, a baby girl was born into a royal lineage. Her name? Cleopatra VII, and though her beginnings were noble, no one could have predicted just how powerful, influential, and unforgettable she would become. But before she was queen, she was a curious little girl with fierce ambition and a mind sharper than most scholars twice her age. Cleopatra was born into the Ptolemaic dynasty, a family that had ruled Egypt for generations. Though they ruled Egypt, they were originally Greek, descendants of Ptolemy I, one of Alexander the Great's trusted generals. This unique blend of Greek and Egyptian heritage would shape Cleopatra's identity and her reign. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was the king of Egypt, and her mother was likely Cleopatra V, although historians still debate her exact identity. Cleopatra grew up in a lavish palace, surrounded by golden halls, exotic animals, and the finest education money could buy. But royal life was far from peaceful. In the Ptolemaic court, power struggles were deadly. Family members often turned against each other, and betrayal was as common as celebration. From an early age, Cleopatra understood that knowledge was power. While most women in the ancient world were denied education, she dove into her studies with intensity and passion. She became fluent in multiple languages, Greek, Latin, Egyptian, and even Hebrew, making her one of the most educated women of her time. She also studied science, math, politics, and literature. Cleopatra didn't want to be a puppet queen sitting on a throne in pretty robes. She wanted to rule with wisdom and authority. Her secret weapon wasn't just her intelligence, though. Cleopatra was known for her captivating voice and commanding presence. People said that when she spoke, the room fell silent. She could charm, persuade, and lead, skills that would soon become essential. But Cleopatra's childhood was far from a fairy tale. Her father was unpopular and considered a weak ruler by many Egyptians. There were times when the family was forced into exile due to political unrest. Even as a child, Cleopatra saw firsthand how fragile power could be and how important it was to protect it. At around 14 years old, Cleopatra's world shifted again. Her mother mysteriously disappeared, perhaps from illness or possibly from assassination, as was common in royal intrigue. Soon after, her father grew ill. Cleopatra was thrust into a world where every decision could mean life or death, and the throne of Egypt would soon be up for grabs. Yet what set Cleopatra apart was her love for Egypt. Unlike her ancestors, she learned the Egyptian language and embraced the culture deeply. She styled herself as the living embodiment of the goddess Isis, presenting herself not just as a ruler, but as a divine protector of her people. This earned her the admiration of Egyptians and set her apart from other Greek rulers who treated Egypt merely as a territory. By the time Cleopatra was in her late teens, she was ready to rule. But ruling Egypt was never going to be easy. Danger lurked in every shadow, from jealous siblings to power-hungry courtiers. Cleopatra knew she would need more than beauty and brains. She would need unshakable courage and a clever strategy. And so began the next chapter of her story. Chapter 2. Cleopatra becomes queen. From the moment she was born, Cleopatra's destiny was royal, but the road to the throne was treacherous and full of betrayal. When her father, Ptolemy XII, died, he left the kingdom to be ruled by Cleopatra and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was only 10 years old. At just 18, Cleopatra became queen. but not alone. The ancient laws required that a male co-ruler be by her side. Although they were meant to rule together, Cleopatra had no intention of sharing true power. She was educated, experienced, and determined. While her brother was still a child, heavily influenced by ambitious advisors who didn't want a strong woman in charge. At first, Cleopatra tried to work with her brother and his guardians, but it quickly became clear. They wanted her gone. The court advisors plotted against her, hoping to take control through her young and impressionable brother. Eventually, their schemes forced Cleopatra out of the palace and into exile. Picture it, a teenage queen wandering the barren Egyptian desert, betrayed, dethroned, and alone, except for a small band of loyal followers. She had no army, no crown, and no certainty, but she had her mind, her voice, and her relentless spirit. Cleopatra would not be defeated. What happens next? That's a story of alliances, charm, daring political moves, and perhaps the most famous love stories in history. But we'll save that for the next chapter. Picking up from her bold return to Egypt with Caesar's support, Cleopatra knew that regaining her throne was just the beginning. She needed to solidify her power and rebuild Egypt's prestige. But to do that, she required more than titles. She needed powerful allies, bold strategies, and the courage to face constant threats. And at this crucial turning point in her life, fate introduced her to Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar, one of the most respected and powerful generals in Rome, had just arrived in Egypt. Known throughout the world for his military genius and political influence, Caesar was in Alexandria to settle a dispute between Cleopatra and her brother, Ptolemy XIII. Cleopatra saw this not as a coincidence, but as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But how could she meet Caesar without being caught by her enemies? She couldn't simply walk into the royal palace. So she did something astonishingly clever. Under the cover of night, Cleopatra had one of her most trusted servants roll her inside a large carpet. Yes, a carpet. Then, as a gift, this rolled-up carpet was smuggled into Caesar's private quarters. When the carpet was unrolled, Caesar was stunned. Out came Cleopatra, dignified, radiant, and full of charm. She didn't beg or plead. Instead, she spoke confidently, sharing her passion for Egypt, her intelligence, and her fierce determination to rule. Caesar was immediately captivated, not only by her beauty, but by her ambition and wisdom. Recognizing her potential, Caesar agreed to help her reclaim the throne. Together, they devised a plan to confront Ptolemy XIII and the powerful court advisors who opposed Cleopatra. What followed was a tense and violent conflict, but Cleopatra and Caesar's combined forces were unstoppable. Eventually, Ptolemy XIII was defeated, and Cleopatra was reinstated as the Queen of Egypt. But Cleopatra wasn't one to rest on her victories. With her throne secure, she set out to improve Egypt's economy, trade networks, and foreign relations. She worked side by side with Caesar to implement reforms that would benefit both nations. Egypt began to thrive once more, and Cleopatra's influence grew stronger. This partnership was not only political. It soon blossomed into a personal relationship filled with passion and mutual admiration. Though Caesar was in his 50s and Cleopatra just in her early 20s, their bond was undeniable. Cleopatra admired Caesar's leadership and military skills, while Caesar was drawn to Cleopatra's eloquence, vision, and royal charisma. They spent weeks sailing the Nile, visiting ancient temples, and discussing the future of their kingdoms. Cleopatra proudly introduced Caesar to the rich culture of Egypt, its architecture, science, and mysticism. In return, Caesar showed her the Roman approach to governance and military strategy. In 47 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to a son, whom she named Ptolemy Caesar, known to the world as Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. Cleopatra dreamed that her son would one day become a powerful ruler who could unite the greatness of Egypt with the strength of Rome. However, not everyone shared her dream. When news of Caesar's close relationship with Cleopatra reached Rome, it caused a political storm. Roman senators were suspicious and outraged. Many feared Cleopatra's influence and viewed her as a foreign threat. Rumors spread quickly. Some even accused her of seducing Caesar to gain control over Rome. Despite the growing criticism, Caesar invited Cleopatra and their son to Rome. Never one to shy away from drama, Cleopatra arrived in style, with golden chariots, rare animals, and a full entourage that dazzled the Roman citizens. It was a grand display of Egyptian power and culture. In Rome, Cleopatra stayed in a luxurious villa gifted by Caesar. She attended grand banquets, mingled with political elites, and even influenced Roman fashion with her exotic Egyptian attire. Yet, not everyone welcomed her warmly. Roman women in particular viewed her as a rival. Her presence challenged their traditional roles, and her influence stirred envy and suspicion. Still, Cleopatra stood proud. She was not there to blend in, but to represent Egypt with strength and dignity. Her time in Rome would soon become one of the most talked about chapters in Roman society, and would mark a turning point in her destiny. After the shock and sorrow of losing Julius Caesar, Cleopatra faced a turning point. She had returned to Egypt heartbroken but resilient, determined to keep her kingdom strong. Now, the next chapter in her story would be just as dramatic, marked by passion, strategy, and a love story that would echo through the ages. Because Cleopatra was so different, so striking and unapologetically bold, she quickly made an impression wherever she went. In Rome, she had stood out among the elite. She was confident, glamorous, and unafraid to command attention. Her presence alone sparked whispers and admiration. While living in Caesar's villa, Cleopatra had witnessed his rise to absolute power. When he declared himself dictator for life, she believed it would strengthen their alliance and possibly secure her son Caesarion's future. But behind the scenes, dark clouds were forming. Many Roman senators feared Caesar's growing influence. They believed he was becoming a tyrant, a threat to Rome's republic. In 44 BCE, their fears turned deadly. Julius Caesar was brutally assassinated on the floor of the Roman Senate, stabbed multiple times by his own colleagues, men he had once trusted. The world was stunned. Cleopatra was devastated. Her greatest ally and the father of her son was gone. Without Caesar's protection, her life in Rome became dangerous. Hostility surrounded her. Many Romans viewed her as a manipulative foreign queen. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, didn't waste time. She quickly gathered her son, her trusted servants, and her wealth, and made a swift escape back to Egypt. But even in grief, Cleopatra's strength never faltered. She mourned Caesar deeply, but she knew Egypt needed her now more than ever. Back on her throne, she governed with renewed focus and determination. She invested in Egypt's military, improved its economy, and bolstered its political strength. And she poured her energy into raising Caesarion, training him to be a future king. She taught him not only the ways of the court, but also the values of wisdom, diplomacy, and resilience. Still, Cleopatra understood the reality of her time. Rome remained the most powerful force in the world. Without the right alliances, Egypt could not survive alone. So she began to scan the horizon for someone who could match Caesar's strength, someone whose partnership could secure Egypt's place in history. This is where the next great chapter of Cleopatra's life begins, with a new name, a new partner, and a new political game. Enter Mark Antony, a fearless Roman general with a fiery spirit and an ambition to rival Caesar himself. Antony was a soldier, a statesman, and a man of great charisma. At that time, Rome was torn by internal power struggles, and Antony was one of the three men, alongside Octavian and Lepidus, ruling the empire as part of the Second Triumvirate. Though Antony and Cleopatra had never met, he had heard of the enchanting Queen of Egypt. With Caesar gone, Antony now sought Egypt's support. Egypt was rich in resources, and Antony knew that Cleopatra's alliance could help him solidify his power. In a dramatic move, he summoned her to meet him in the city of Tarsus, in what is now modern-day Turkey. Cleopatra, understanding the importance of first impressions, didn't just accept the invitation, she turned it into a theatrical masterpiece. She arrived in Tarsus aboard a magnificent golden ship with silver oars and purple sails that fluttered in the breeze. Draped in shimmering garments, Cleopatra portrayed herself as the goddess Aphrodite, the deity of love and beauty. She was surrounded by servants dressed as gods and goddesses, and the air was filled with the scent of incense and fresh flowers. When Mark Antony laid eyes on her, he was mesmerized. He had expected a meeting with a monarch, but instead, he encountered a vision of elegance, confidence, and power. Cleopatra greeted him not with submission, but with sharp wit and commanding presence. Their chemistry was undeniable. Cleopatra invited Antony to Egypt, and he eagerly accepted. In Alexandria, their connection deepened. They attended opulent feasts, sailed along the Nile, and immersed themselves in games, music, and philosophy. Cleopatra revealed to Antony the rich culture and splendor of her homeland. As days turned into weeks, their political partnership evolved into a passionate romance. They dreamed of building an empire that would rival even that of Rome, one that combined Egyptian grace with Roman might. Cleopatra saw in Antony the strength to help protect her kingdom. Antony, in turn, was enchanted by Cleopatra's intellect, allure, and ambition. Together, they became more than rulers. They became a legend. With their love deepening and their political alliance growing, Cleopatra and Mark Antony believed they could build a powerful future together. But as tensions rose, so did the shadows of war and betrayal. Cleopatra, with Antony at her side, saw a future where Egypt was safe, sovereign, and more powerful than ever. Their partnership wasn't built on romance alone. It was a strategic alliance. Antony needed Cleopatra's vast resources and wealth to support his military campaigns, and Cleopatra needed Antony's political and military strength to protect her kingdom. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. Their love story blossomed beyond politics. Cleopatra and Antony had 3 children together: Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus. Cleopatra saw her children not only as a source of personal joy, but also as the heirs to a future empire that would blend the grandeur of Egypt with the might of Rome. However, not everyone shared their vision. In Rome, Antony's alliance with Cleopatra stirred outrage. Octavian, Julius Caesar's adopted son and Antony's rival, saw Cleopatra as a dangerous foreign influence. He accused her of manipulating Antony, claiming she had cast a spell over him with her beauty and charm. To make matters worse, Antony was still officially married to Octavian's sister, Octavia. By choosing to remain with Cleopatra instead of honoring his Roman marriage, Antony deeply insulted Octavian and fueled their already growing political feud. The whispers and accusations soon turned into open conflict. Octavian declared Cleopatra and Antony enemies of Rome. War was inevitable. Antony and Cleopatra, aware that their love and their kingdoms were on the line, began to prepare for the battle of their lives. The defining moment came in 31 BCE with the Battle of Actium, a massive naval confrontation off the western coast of Greece. Cleopatra commanded her Egyptian fleet, while Antony led his Roman legions. The stakes were immense. If they won, their vision of a united empire could become reality. If they lost, everything would crumble. As dawn broke over the sea, hundreds of ships filled the horizon. The air was thick with tension. Cleopatra and Antony stood side by side, leading their fleets into battle. They fought with bravery and determination, but Octavian's navy was larger, better organized, and ruthlessly effective. In the midst of the battle, something unexpected happened. Cleopatra's flagship abruptly turned and sailed away from the fight. Historians still debate the reason. Some believe she was trying to preserve her fleet. Others say she was responding to a prearranged signal. Whatever the truth, Antony was devastated. Seeing her retreat, he assumed she had abandoned him. Confused and heartbroken, Antony's forces began to lose cohesion.